and welcome to the second of our three-part series, Engen Play On Coach the Coach Masterclasses. I'm Julia Stewart and I'll be hosting you for this one as we chat to two incredible and very, very learned and experienced coaches, former players. Duncan, Crowie and Simphiwe Dludlu are in the house today. We are live, and it's just a reminder for you that there'll be a Q&A session at the end of this. You are more than welcome to submit your questions. The topic we're covering today is twofold. It's motivating your team and how to prepare a team for a tournament. Also, just a reminder that we want you to tag us on our social media handles. Instagram is engen.sa, on Twitter it's engen_soccer, and on Facebook, Engen Soccer. Use the hashtags Engen Play Apart, Play It Forward, and Engen Soccer. Engen Play Apart, hashtag Play It Forward, and hashtag Engen Soccer. All right, so let me then introduce you to our two prestigious guests here today in our live webinar session. It's the second of a third-part series. So just to give people some background, we've got Simphiwe Dludlu to my right, ladies first coach. She is the coach of the under-17 women's side, Basetsana. She's a former captain of Banyana, and she's also an analyst on Supersport. Duncan Crowie, I know you from your coaching days at Santos, but you also played. You're a top goal scorer, a former player of the season, footballer of the season, in fact. You are also the head of youth now at Ajax, and I think you're a qualified teacher.
That's right.
So, yes, in a perfect position to teach us how to motivate today. So let me start with you then. What do you mean when you say motivation?
You see, it's easy for us as coaches or for coaches to say that, listen, I'm going to motivate my team. But do we know what motivation is all about? If you break the word up, motivation, you will see that it derives from the word motive. And motive means going somewhere, motivating for something. And that is what we as coaches must do, to motivate the players to reach an objective. And we've got to start somewhere, and then we've got to guide the process. It doesn't matter when you reach your objective, if it's in the first week, first month, or the whole season. As when you reach your objective, you've got to make sure that you maintain it, and then your training sessions itself must reach another level. And that is how we try to motivate our players. If we know exactly what it's all about, then we can start the process.
Why is it necessary to motivate?
Man, every coach, it doesn't matter if they coach the under-7 team or the PSL team for that matter. They want to be successful. And if you motivate your players, they will bring you success. If your players are not motivated, you can forget about even the player itself progressing as far as the player's development is concerned. So it's important for the coach to motivate his players. But then, of course, he must know where to start. He must know his players, and he must start right there to ensure that he motivates them in the correct way. Because all the players cannot be motivated with the same topic that you talk about. So we must keep that in mind as well. But it's important if you want to be successful.
Simphiwe, your topic today is more focused on how to prepare a team for a tournament, and I suppose this is key for next year's Engen Knockout when we are able to resume, of course, on a break this year due to COVID-19 pandemic and the lockdown in South Africa. What is one of the first things you look at when preparing a team for a tournament? I mean, do you look at maybe the type of tournament?
It is very important for you to look at the type of tournament, because you might find out it's a one-day tournament, it's a knockout tournament, or it's there's a round robin, there's group stages, because that helps you to understand the quality of your squad, the number of players that must be there. It also helps you to prepare adequately, because if you know exactly how long or what type of tournament you are going to, makes it easy for you to nail down the challenges or how to properly prepare your team. And if I may say, I mean, you decide on the age group as well. If you know that it's a 1 month tournament, for example, you're going to the World Cup, or very important, the Indian tournament. It's not a 1-day tournament, you know. You go through, play against other teams and all of that. And it's not just one match. So that is very important for you to understand. If you know it's not a 1-day match, it's three games probably in a group, maybe you are 4 in a group, you understand that you must have a squad that can be rotated. You need fresher players for a longer tournament. You must have quality players as well, so that, and in quality, I don't just mean you must have all excellent players. All of them are good, yes. And in you understanding the type of tournament, it will help you to nail down your goals, to say, if I want to expose these players to a tournament, which type of players must I bring. If I want to go for a kill and really stem on either preparing for games after the tournament, then you know exactly what type of players you must bring in there. It helps you also to know, if you know the type of tournament, then you know what is expected of your team. And it's easy for you to either put less pressure or more pressure, but everything needs to be precise.
Just a reminder to all of you watching to pay careful attention, because not only do we have a Q&A after this where you can submit your questions, but we're also going to have a questionnaire related to the topics today where you can accumulate points and win prizes for your team at the end of the campaign. So pay careful attention. When you talk about something like knowing the type of tournament, important, I can understand that. But what about the environment? How much emphasis do you put on that? I mean, is it artificial turf? Is it a rainy season? Do you focus on those kinds of things as well?
Yes, it's really, really important to understand that, because it creates awareness for your players, firstly, to know where's the tournament happening. Because you find that you say to your players, we are just going to a tournament, they get there, it's snow. Whereas they come from South Africa and there's no snow, for example. And then you shock them. Then it means that your results won't be as great as you want them to be, because automatically in their minds they're thinking, oh, we are not used to this, we didn't anticipate this. Already you are fighting with that. In their minds, they're not prepared for that. So you anticipate, and it helps you to manage their expectations, because in that way you are able to say, okay, so we are going to Gauteng. Gauteng can rain anytime, but it's different to Cape Town, the Western Cape, where you have 4 seasons in a day. So that way it helps you to understand the type of football that you want to play, the types of players that you are bringing there. And if you know the demographics, it's easy also for you to say, this is how I prepare my team. I know that it's going to be sunny, it's going to be rainy. Expose your players to that. When you prepare for the tournament, let them play in the sun, so that when they get to the tournament and they meet the same conditions, it's not a shocker for them. They can play in that, they can train in that. And it also helps you to be able to say, if we need to manage our goals, we'll be able to manage them in this particular manner, because we know where we are going. Demographics also helps you to know how far we have to travel. Because you say to players, we are going to Limpopo, and you're moving from Northern Cape. You did not tell them. They're expecting to just go for an hour and get there. But if you are able to say to them, it's a long journey, you are already challenging them to say, okay, it's a long journey, it means I need to focus more, I need to have fun on the road. So it helps you, especially with younger players, it helps you to create an adventure for them. And with that, it's easy for you to manage the expectations, to say, okay, we're going to travel for 24 hours. You don't find grumpy players. They will be grumpy because of the road, but back of their heads, they will know that coach did mention it's a long journey. So the disappointment becomes minimal.
A lot of responsibility on the coach in terms of preparation, but also in terms of keeping the players motivated, which is something you touched on, whether that be motivated throughout a lengthy journey, bus journey, motivated throughout a lengthy tournament. What factors determine how you as a coach motivate?
You touch on something very special there, Julia. You know, I've been around the Engen Knockout Challenge for many years. And I've listened to coaches give halftime talks or team talks before the game. That is not only when the motivation starts. It should be starting way ahead of the tournament. It should be starting right at the beginning of the season. And in motivating your player in certain things. So when they get to the tournament, they are motivated already. We mustn't be fooled by the fact thinking that halftime team talk or that talk before the game will suddenly spark a fire or something underneath that player. Yes, it might be for 5 minutes or so, but the player will keep on doing what he's been doing throughout the season. So it's important for us to start motivating, like as Simphiwe said, right before the trip even starts. When the season starts, that is when you start, and it depends on a lot of things. We must remember that if I try and motivate you, and the 2 or 3 of us are sitting in the room, what works for you might not work for her, and you've got a squad of 18 players. So you must make sure that you know your players. It depends on the style of your motivation as well, because we've got coaches, under 7 coaches, we've got 18 coaches, we've got PSL coaches. Each motivation level and style will differ. The youngster, just starting with his coaching, he will still try and build up a culture as far as his motivation style is concerned. The coaches that's been coaching for 10, 20, 30 years, they've got a culture already, and they've worked out already in the past, this is working for me, or this is not working for me. So they will go with it. So at the start, you've got to find a proper motivation style and level that works for you, and thereafter, you can go into motivating players and know that it will work. And then, of course, you will also know which players to talk to in which manner.
Like what you said about the motivation doesn't just start with a team talk, because Simphiwe actually has a saying that says, train like champions. Do you want to elaborate and just complete that saying for us, please?
Yeah, you train your team like champions when nobody's watching, so that when the music plays, they just dance to the tune and everybody enjoys their dance moves. And when you do that, it becomes automatic for your players, because when you excel, when nobody's watching, when the fans are there, it becomes second nature. And as coaches, it helps you to manage the pressure you put on the players, because as coaches you want to see miracles when players are under pressure. It's impossible. That's when players crack. I always say before a game you give players 100% information, they only take 1%, 99% it's up to them, or sometimes they don't even take any of the information you give them. And true what coach is saying, they go on the culture, what they've been doing. You can't break habits for 20 days and then on 21st day you want to give them different things. So in you being able to train them prior, it becomes second nature. Any challenges that they face, it's easy for them to spring up and come up with solutions, because they've faced almost the similar challenges, and it becomes easy for you to turn the tables and say, okay, let me motivate them differently, because you know exactly how they respond. So it's very important for coaches to make sure they prepare their teams for any situation at any time. And that also acts as part of motivation, because it means that you prepared them, you motivated them enough for them to motivate themselves. When you are not there, you get a red card, what then? So the work that you do prior helps you to say what is happening currently. It's easy for us to manage.
It seems like a coach has to be everything. You have to be a leader, you have to be a psychologist, you have to be a motivator. Duncan, what makes an effective coach?
And many of our coaches, they go to coaching courses. And the first thing they teach you at the coaching course is what the coach is all about. You've mentioned quite a few things now. He must be a teacher, he must be a doctor sometimes. It depends on the level of the club. Somebody gets hurt, they don't have a first aid at the club. You are the doctor. Many of us must be a parent figure as well, because of what happens at home. And the player comes to training knowing, I'm going to get some love at training. A coach has got to be a lot of things. It also depends on the resources at your club. If you play or if you coach at a professional club and you've got your physio, you've got the guy that does the analyst for your games, you've got your assistant coach, you've got your physio sitting next to them, it makes it so much easier for the club. But not all of us have that luxury. But in the end, there's two things that a coach must do, a good coach must do. That is to teach, and that is to motivate. That is why I think that the motivation part is very important, just as important as the coaching part. Remember, the Engen Knockout Challenge is all about developing players. Now we're talking about what the coach must do. But after all, if we want to develop the player, the coach must know exactly how to motivate that player, or how to teach that player, for that player to develop. And if the coach is properly aligned with the teaching and the motivation, then obviously that player will motivate. And that is what this tournament is all about.
And just a reminder, of course, you're saying he for coaches, but we are looking forward to our next generation of Simphiwe Dludlus as well. And we're very proud to be a part of the Engen Knockout Challenge, launching the Engen Knockout Challenge for women as of this year. It's officially underway. And of course, next year we'll play for the first time. Duncan, you mentioned be a teacher. You repeated the teaching, and I know you've got a teaching background, you're qualified. Why must a coach be a teacher?
If you talk about coaching is teaching a player how to play soccer. And when I did my research as far as this motivating a team is concerned, I researched quite a few coaches all over the world in different sporting codes as well. And one I came across was a top basketball college coach in America. And he said in the league, most of the teams that were successful, the coach was the teacher. And he treated the player as a student. And if you go to the classroom, the teacher's job is primarily to see progress in the student. And that is what the coach must eventually be, to ensure that there's progress in the player. And remember, my first words were the reason why we motivate is for the coach to be successful. And if you motivate him and teach him in a certain way, you're going to get your success. Because a player, especially when we come to the under 18 age group, they're not ignorant. They know when they are improving. And if you motivate him to improve, and the player realizes, hold it, I am improving, that alone is going to motivate himself even more to become better. So we've got to be a teacher, and we must treat our players as students, and then we'll reach success.
And then the kind of approach, is it because I said so? Or do you encourage explaining to your players perhaps why you're telling them to do something a certain way?
Another thing that I came across was that players are inquisitive. Players always want to know, why must I do this drill? If you can explain to them, this is the reason why you're doing this drill, and this is why you must do it to improve, the players will do it. But sometimes players, or coaches rather, they think that players know exactly why they're doing the drill. They don't. They don't know why we're doing a certain drill. But if you explain to them, this is the reason, that it will be that extra motivation for them. And that word why, it triggers some psychological aspect within a human being. And that invites a certain response. So it's important to explain to the players all the time, this is why we're doing it. But as a coach, and a good coach will know, don't waste a lot of time in explanations while they are doing it. Explain to them, this is why you're doing it, and this is why you've got to do that. And the players will be motivated by that.
Just a reminder to you, the hashtags for today, hashtag Engen play a part, hashtag play it forward, and hashtag Engen soccer. We're looking to engage with you on social media as well. A lot of first-time coaches perhaps involved in the Engen knockout next year, especially with the girls' tournaments. I'm just taking a guess here, or predicting a little bit as well. And coaches, while Engen Knockout Challenge is a breeding ground for young talent, it's also for young coaches. Young analysts, young assistant coaches, goalkeeper coaches, and so on. You spoke about when you're preparing for a tournament, you mentioned finding out the time of the tournament, the length of the tournament, and so on. Why is it important to know, or maybe give us an example of how to plan and manage for, say, a tournament that's the length of the Engen Knockout Challenge, or a tournament that's going to go on for a couple of days?
The biggest failure is when you get to competition and you don't have a solution immediately for the challenges that you are facing. And most coaches, the mistake that they make is that we'll see when we get to the tournament. Already you are putting yourself under pressure, you are putting your team under pressure, and your team, I mean your assistant coach, goalkeeper coach, the whole team that coach mentioned. Some clubs do have your physio, your doctor, everybody coming through. Usually in youth you don't see it as much, but now because of the progress and how serious football is also becoming for youth levels, especially in South Africa, now you are seeing these elements being brought into the team. If you understand the duration of the tournament, firstly, it affords you an opportunity to plan adequately and precise. Let me take you through it. If you know a tournament is for 2 weeks or a week, and you're playing every second day, it's easy for you to prepare your team the same way before you go to the tournament. If you know you're playing on a Monday, Tuesday you're not playing, Wednesday you're playing, Thursday you're not playing, Friday you're playing, it's difficult when you just take your players and say go there, and then they have to face that. But if you do it prior, it's easy for you to find the type of opponents that you are bringing in that might match similar opponents you'll meet at the tournament. It helps you to manage the load. It helps you to manage the intensity, the recovery for your team before going to the tournament. So it means you have to replicate what you are anticipating at the tournament. That helps you not to shock your players. It helps you not to overload. It helps you not to under or overtrain your team, because you know exactly. It might not be exactly because things change when you get to the tournament, but when things are different, it's easy for you to adapt because you've anticipated, you've prepared for that. It's very critical for coaches to understand that element, because if you are going to a week's tournament and you've only brought 18 players or 12 players, it doesn't help your cause. There's injuries, there's sicknesses, there's stage fright also with players, because these are young players that some of them you're still exposing them to a tournament. Some of them have played before, some have never played, and some have never even traveled that far. So some get to there, then they see other players, they don't want to play anymore. Do you have a big squad to manage that? So it's very important for you as a coach to understand the duration of the tournament and understand that it will help you to know this is where we throw our strong squad, this is where we mix the squad. So it helps you play and be able to expose all your players to the exact situation that you might meet at the tournament. I've done this before as a coach, and it helped. It worked miraculously, because when the players get there, it's second nature. They know, okay guys, we are playing today, tomorrow we are not playing, there might be a training session, or if there's no training session, what do we do? You plan accordingly. Do I let them watch the game? Do I let them rest? You are able to manage the players. Young players, if you are not organized as a coach, you are in trouble. There will be chaos.
And does that apply to times of games as well? Do you know that the knockout challenge is throughout the day? So perhaps some games you'll play in the morning when you're training. Sometimes you'll train in the afternoon. Is that something you also take into account? And what about the schedule where you might have short space between games? Do you also train and prepare for that?
It is important to try by all means to expose your players to that prior to the tournament, because it's players that are not morning people. In the morning you find that they wake up, they don't want to eat their brunch and all of that. That time you have an 8 o'clock game in the morning. What do?
Yes.
That's why you find the coaches frustrated. Now it comes to a point where they are demotivating their players. You don't want to play, you are not motivated to come to but you didn't expose them. You didn't challenge them prior to the tournament, so that when there's pressure, they know how to deal with it. So you try and expose your players prior to that. One day you say we are training at 8 a.m. in the morning. Now they have to think, what time do I need to get up? What time do I need to eat? What do I feed them as well when they're playing at 8 a.m. in the morning? So all of those elements are important, and that's why you find that the players don't have energy. If you're not experienced as a coach to know which type of food must I give them, if they're going to play at lunchtime, for example, some of the games are playing right in the middle at lunchtime. You're supposed to be having your lunch, but you're on the field. When is your pre-match meal? What type of food do you eat? You can't eat cereal when you're going to your afternoon match, for example. And if you are eating cereal in the morning, what do you couple it with? So all of those elements are important for you as a coach to understand and know, so that you prepare your team as closest to what they will face to the tournament as possible. Because you'd find that some players can't play at night. You can't deny young players an opportunity to play, because maybe some of them are nearsighted, short-sighted, or far-sighted. Some can't play at night, but you can't say, I'm leaving you behind, you're not going to the tournament because you have that challenge. You bring them along. There's games that they'll be able to play. There's games that they aren't able to play. I've had a player before where she says, Coach, when it's raining, there's lightning, I can't play. Literally, she can't play. And she's a great player. I can't say I'm not taking you to a tournament. So if it's going to rain and the game goes on before it rains, whilst it starts raining, it's easy for me to take her out. I've already let her play for that moment, then I bring in another player. So those elements are really important for you as a coach, so that you don't stress yourself, you don't stress your players. It's easy for you to adapt and change situations. As you go to a tropical country where it can rain anytime, there's sunshine, there's lightning, all of that, and then my lightning player can play because anything can happen. At kickoff, then it starts raining, then she struggles. So once you know all those elements and you anticipate them, it's easy for you to adapt as quickly as you can. And it doesn't qualify you or promise you success or great results, but it qualifies you an opportunity to be close to success.
It also speaks to something that Duncan was mentioning earlier, knowing your players. And that comes from showing you care, comes from establishing relationships, and also everything Simphiwe had just said about the way in which you train. It's about getting players familiar, establishing habits.
Many of us as coaches, we spend a lot of time at coaching courses, which is good, which we must do. But not many of us spend a lot of time knowing how to motivate a player and what you need to motivate a player. All of us must, if you want to motivate a player, you must know the player. How many of us really go to the player's house, get used to the player's background? Because if you motivate him in a certain way, you must know where he comes from. How many of us really have time during a training session or before a training session for that matter to talk one-on-one to a player away from football. Talk about what's happening at school. Talk about what's happening at home. Talk about, did you eat something today? Maybe you jump on his back because he's not doing something, not knowing what happened during the day. So it's important for us to get to know the player and have that one-on-one with the player. Sometimes it's important for us, even walking from the dressing room to the field. If it's a 20-meter walk or a 100-meter walk for that matter, put your arms around him. Ask him something. Because you remember, players, they go home. And sometimes the parents ask them, what did the coach say? How was training? What did the coach say? It will be a sad day if the youngster replies, the coach didn't say a word to me. And it's important, and I don't want the coaches to answer. They got to answer to themselves. Do they speak to the players every day? And that is so difficult. So it's important for us to know our players, how to motivate our players, and also the background of our players. That is important if we want to be successful in motivating our players.
Yeah, and then also the other point that I mentioned, which seemed to be coming out, and I know you also wanted to talk about this, was the establishment of habits.
Yes. She touched, some people touched on it earlier on.
Yes.
You know, the team talk you have, I've mentioned it already, the team talk you have before the game, it's not going to ignite any fire. Maybe for 5 minutes, as I said earlier on. But what that player is going to do in the game is what they did before the game. Training sessions or months leading up to the game. You cannot expect a player just to turn on his head like that or to turn on the magic all of a sudden. That player is going to play in the game what he's doing at training. So that training or motivation needs to start at the beginning of the season, beginning of the week, and not only at the tournament itself. That it's going to bring the best out of the player itself. If you want to make sure that the player is motivated and you want him to work very hard and get that in the game, then at the first training session, if they start the game or the training session with a rondo, make sure he works hard. Get on his back. If the next part of the training session maybe is a passing the roll, get on his back. Make sure he works hard. Don't let him relax. If the next part or the last part of a training session is a game, make him work hard and be on his back every single day. Guess what's going to happen in the game? That is how they're going to play. So we must make sure that we make hard work becomes a habit. And then automatically, what you want from the player is going to be in the game. And remember, you want to be successful. Good habits will make you successful. So we as coaches must make sure we breed good habits all the time. And every training session from the start of the season.
So even if I give 100%, and I go to the Engen Knockout Challenge as a coach and I've prepared my team, do I tell the team we are going to win? We can go there to try and win, but do I tell them we're going to win? Or do I try and establish as a coach a little bit more of a realistic goal? How do you approach things?
This reminds me going to the World Cup with under-17s. It was the second time we go to the World Cup, and we are up against first world countries. That's their development is better and all of that. Do I tell them we're up against Japan, who all of them play in the same academy? Do I tell them we're up against Mexico, who has beaten Canada, who's one of the best in America? Or do I go there and say, hey, we're champs going there? Very important to understand who you are, what you're up against, and what you're capable of. And for you to establish all of that is for you to be realistic with your team. Sit them down and say, we are going to a tournament. What do you think? Hear what they think. You already know what you want as a coach. You want to go there and win the tournament. And at the back of your mind, you also have facts there to say, do I have the right squad? Are they quality enough to go and compete? Or are we just going there to put a team together? Is the tryouts for all of them when going to the tournament? So your goal is very important from the beginning. The best thing, sit down with the team and say, we are going to a tournament. What do you think the outcome should be? That way, if their players are able to say, we want to go there and win, it's them saying that. Who's playing on the field? They're playing. You are practically just a bystander there on the sideline. They either listen or not to you when you're talking to them in the tournament. But if they are able to put down their goals and say, Coach, this is 1, 2, 3, 4 we want to achieve, you keep them accountable for that. You don't keep them accountable at the tournament. In preparation, from the start of the season, prior to the tournament, it's easy for you to say, this is what you guys wanted to do. And how do we achieve this? How you prepare them. You stimulate excellence before even going to the tournament, because they know back of their heads, we said we wanted to win the tournament. If Simphiwe now is dragging her feet, you say, hey champ, you want to be a champ like that? And remember, what you say to them and how you make them feel, they always remember that. If it's a good feeling, no matter how tired they are able to remember. So it's important as coaches to be able to put down the goals, your goals, team goals, and see which one carries more value, which one is realistic. And if their goal is to say, coach, we just want to go there and have fun, they won't say that to you as players. They'll only say, we want to go there and win. And if you just want them to go there, get the exposure, have fun, and exposure is very important. And unfortunately, most club owners will tell you, go there to win. But in youth football, it should be playing for you to be better, playing for you to enjoy. Fun, the mentors, but fun is capital letters. It's for you to have fun first, because you are understanding different cultures, you are meeting new players, you're exposing yourself to excellency against other greater players. There's a lot of stress that comes there. So if you are strategic and clear with your objectives from the start to say, this is what we want to achieve as a team, it's easy to keep everyone accountable. Also keeps you in check to say, I know these players might not be able to win this tournament right now, but I'm taking them there to plan for next year's tournament. I'm taking them there to plan for the upcoming season. Once you are clear from the beginning, it's easy to manage expectations. It's easy for you to stimulate greater performance before and even at the tournament. You keep them in check. When they start being too excited at the tournament, you're able to say, hey, remember our goal is, as much as we have fun, but our end goal is right at the beginning. So I think mostly coaches establish we want to win this tournament when they're at the tournament. Then they start putting pressure on the players, and these are young players, under 18, under 20. They're not used to, some of them are not used to playing in front of crowds. Some of them have never played against better players. So now there's a lot that comes into it. So if you are simple and straightforward, realistic with your goals from the beginning, it becomes easy to even motivate your team. When chips are down and they're losing 5-0, because they know there are champs that are there. And my motto is always that we play from victory. When we get on the field, the score is level. Both of us you have a point, I have a point. Then we'll fight for that 1 point. So you're going in there as a champ. So even they're losing 5-0, the only time they'll cry is when they know, okay, we are out of the tournament. But I don't want them crying because they think they failed with their performance. That helps you to create or help nurture better players that are able to say, you know what, we're up against the best in the world. Okay, we lost against the best, but we'll find them next time how they bounce back.
Duncan, did you want to add to that?
Yeah, no, it's very interesting because, I always mention that the Engen Knockout Challenge, that we don't have losers. We talk about coaches. I'm talking from the coach's point of view. Yes, we will have a team that will win the tournament, but we will have 15 other teams. How do you become successful as well as a coach? By improving your players. If you see that there has been an improvement in your team during that tournament, then already you're a winner. Because remember, we as juniors, we are junior coaches, your success is improving your players. So unfortunately, only one team is going to win. But did your players play well at the tournament? Did your players show that there's a slight improvement at the tournament? That comes with motivation throughout the season, leading up to the Engen tournament. I mentioned the Engen tournament because we know it's the number one youth tournament in the country at the moment. So this is the one you want to perform in. You don't really have to win it. Just make sure your players play and they compete against the best in the country.
I love the way you're both speaking because it's realistic. It's setting micro targets as well. So improvement is one target, and it's not pessimistic. So important as a coach, and we're here to talk about motivation. I think some people, and we know it's human nature for some people to be pessimistic and say, oh, you didn't win. Hey, but let's look at the positives. And the truth is, as a coach, you can only do so much. And I know that something Robin van Persie said really stuck with you, because motivation can only go so far from the coach. A lot of it, as you mentioned, has to come from within.
You as a coach can talk until you're blue in the face. But if the player don't accept it, if they don't accept it, there's nothing that will go into them that will motivate them. It reminds me of something I came across a video of Van Persie. He spoke about his son that plays for Feyenoord, under 13. They played against Ajax, but his son was on the bench for the whole game. On the way home, you could see the son wasn't happy, the son was blaming the coach, the son was blaming just about everybody. And Van Persie said, but now you sound like a loser. Losers talk the way you do. You must be a winner. And what do you do to be a winner? You must go out and you must show that you want to be in that team. In the next game, you want to be in the starting lineup. So you as a coach or as a parent can say whatever you want to. According to Van Persie, the next training session, that was the Monday after the Saturday game, he told his wife, I'm going to watch them train. And while he was sitting in his car, cold day, hoodie on, he says, watching his son, he saw this guy, this tiger, running up and down, playing hard. That was a sign, and that's a sign to me, and it should be a sign to everybody, that player, his son, really wanted to work hard, really wanted to improve. So we can take heat from that, we can take our cue from that, and the players must also take the cue from that. It doesn't matter how good the coach is at motivating, but if the player doesn't accept it, and if the player doesn't show it whenever the player goes onto the training field or playing field, it will count for nothing. So we must make sure the player knows it must come from within the player itself.
I saw something very similar in the Anelka documentary, also about his kids, also giving the same lesson that you've got to work hard, you have to work harder. The motivation is intrinsic, and we saw it closer to home. You were working on the end of the league season here in South Africa with no fans to motivate you, with no loved ones around you because you're in the bubble. That motivation has to come from within. I mean, just share with us what you saw towards the end of the league season, and certain players and certain teams weren't able to lift themselves without those outside factors.
If you don't believe, no matter, like Coach says, no matter how much you read, you watch, you hear, if you don't believe, really, really believe in it, no matter how great the coach can be, no matter how bad your opponents can be, if you don't believe, or no matter how great your opponents can be, if you don't believe in it yourself, then we're just wasting time. So it's the belief. I'll put it out there. If Kaizer Chiefs, they were leading so much and they showed belief first half of the season and all of that, now it's a two-horse race between two big teams. The one that believes the most that they belong up there, they want to be champs, they are champs. Half the time they are the ones that will come out as champs. If you really believe, I don't know how to explain it, Jules. If you believe you can get on that mountain, you really can, because it becomes mind over matter. If you believe, no matter what challenge that comes your way, you're able to say, hey, this is where I'm going and I'm going to achieve it. Even if you come number 2 in anything, you know that I'm a champ that believe that I can make it up to the top, that you focus on you and put everything you have in there, you are able to achieve. And it's a slight difference between believing and thinking you believe it. If you think you believe it, somebody might come and sway you differently. You can go that way. But if you truly believe it, like God says, it's intrinsic. If you believe in something, it's not easy for somebody to sway you and tell you or convince you differently. And if a coach believes in their players, if a coach believes in themselves as well, it's easy for you to go out there and excel at everything. And excelling doesn't mean that you will win score-wise, but it means you will win over your mind. You will win over naysayers. You will win over challenges that always put you down. You will win over people that think we won't progress. So it's very important for you to believe. And if you are able to motivate your players as much as you can, sometimes sit down with them and ask them, do you really believe what I'm saying? Do you believe in what you are thinking and what you are saying? Then you'll see them, now they start to think. You've stimulated something. Then they start emulating what they believe in. It becomes second nature. Without thinking, they do it.
Pretty sure that from session 1 of Coach the Coach masterclasses, we would have heard how winning is a habit from Coach Pitso Mosimane. Just a final question, and a more practical one before we close off this session with regards to the Engen Knockout Challenge and preparing a team for a tournament, Simphiwe. how aware are you? You've briefly touched on this going to an international tournament, but perhaps relative to Engen knockout, how aware are you of the type of opponents that you're having, and also trends, perhaps in playing trends or formation trends? Just some practical advice for the coaches up there as they prepare their team for the Engen knockout.
I think Coach did mention it, that when you're a coach, you're a teacher. You also become a student of the game as well. If you are a student of the game, you grasp as much as you can, you learn, you expose yourself, you challenge yourself as much as you can, you become knowledgeable, you become an expert at what you do. When you're an expert at what you do, it's easy for you to learn, be better, teach, be able to adapt. Now, this element is also important. It's not as easy to attain enough information, especially coming to a junior tournament like the Engen tournament, because some of the teams are new, and we know in youth football, mostly in South Africa, we don't get footage of the players unless it's out there in the net and all of that, which is something that is becoming better day by day. You go to the Engen website, you are able to see previous teams and see what they've been doing. So already, if you know the trends and teams are playing 4-2-3-1, it's the current trend, you come there and you only prepare for 4-4-2. You think all the teams play 4-4-2, you'll get to a lot because your players are not exposed to that. You as a coach, it's not easy for you to adapt. And this, please, I need coaches to understand this from me. You understanding the opponents or anticipating what type of opponents you meet, the trends and all of that. Do not dwell on it. Please, coaches, do not dwell on it, because you go out there and you say, I know for a fact that Simphiwe FC is going to play 4-5-1. You only prepare for 4-5-1. Then you get there, they play 4-2-2-2-2, aeroplane or carpet football or train. Then you are in trouble. Now you put pressure on your players. But you understanding these trends, it helps you to be able to think on your feet, expose your players to say, if we come up against a 4-4-2, how do we adapt and change in the game? Now, that's where the teacher comes in. And if you are able to understand the types of opponents you're up against, international players that are big, Germans are big, for example, and you come with South Africans or Brazilians, they are nippy, they're skillful. Now, if you understand that, you are able to, also the types of players that you pick for your squad, you are able to mix and be able to say, okay, I know Simphiwe is short and quick, she'll be up against a tall defender, who do I pair her with? It helps you also to teach the players to say, we are able to say, if I'm not as agile, it means that goalkeeper must come on. Now you teach players to understand the dynamics of the game. It's easy. That's where development comes in. Remember, winning for us youth coaches, it's not really getting gold. But winning for us, there's progression. Players learn and understand the game. They grow with that. They're able to anticipate, make their own decisions. I think I'm one of great coaches because I found coaches like Coach Crowie who were teachers to me as well. That's why I ended up being a coach as well. So that is very important for you to be an expert at what you do. It's easy to teach, adapt, and be able to get the desired results.
So much information to process, such wonderful topics, and such a wonderful discussion with both of you. But we are about to wrap up now, and I'm going to give you a chance, Duncan, to just say a final message in closing, if you want to, about motivation.
Yeah, it's important for us as coaches to remember, and we must not be fooled by the thinking that motivation only starts before a game or at halftime. It starts at the beginning of the year. Remember, not all of us are going to win. And that time when you feel you don't feel like motivating, that is really the time you need to motivate. Remember, all of us are fresh at the start of the season, the player and the coach. That is the time we motivate. But midway through the season or towards the end of the season, when things start getting stale, that is the time you need to motivate. Because it's not where you start, it's where you finish. And remember, when you start the season, the goals you set for yourself as a coach and for your team, are you going to reach it at the end of the season? If you stop close to halfway, if you don't push it through. So push through, it doesn't matter what happens. Remember, a player will only improve if you teach him. A player will only improve if the player see or recognize improvement in himself or herself. Then the player will improve. If the player doesn't say it or see it, you must remind the player, I think you improved because of whatever reason. And that is when the player will go forward. Our job is to make sure that players progress, that players develop. We cannot go blame the national coach. We prepare the players at junior level for our national team. If we as coaches are properly prepared, teaching them and motivating them, The job of the national team coach or national team coaches, junior or seniors, will be made so much easier if we do our job properly. And it's got to start somewhere, coaching courses, as well as knowing how to motivate a player and also what is needed to motivate that player.
And now, Simphiwe, I'll give you a chance to say your final word to coaches out there who are watching and getting ready to prepare their teams for the Engen Knockout Challenge when we do return to the field.
I think the most important thing for coaches, keep it simple. Keep it simple. We say KISS. Keep it simple, superstar. If you do that, it's easy for you to go back to the drawing board and rectify. It's easy for you to train and plan better because there are no intricacies there. You are able to just keep it clean. Remember, these are young players that don't want overload of information. They want it clear, straightforward, to the point. It's easy for you to go back to the drawing board and redo, or even go back to the drawing board and say, I've achieved 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So it's really important for coaches to understand that it's not about them. It's about the players' progression, development, and success. Success does not only mean that goal, but success is then being able to be exposed to greater heights of football, be better players for the future. And last but not least, coaches, please make sure to keep it fun, fresh, and fabulous for the kids. They are superstars. Remind them, show them, even when they've lost that game, remind them they are superstars, because if they believe it, they see it, they feel it. It's easy for them to model it every day of their lives. Even when you're not there, they know my coach said I'm a superstar and I'm able to be better at what I do. So love them as much as you can, but keep it fun. You'll see how many of them will come back the next day to say it's challenging, but it's fun. I'm going back to it. So have fun as coaches. Don't put pressure on the players. The only pressure that must be there, it must be for them to excel prior the tournament, not at the tournament.
Thank you so much for those wonderful words of wisdom. That concludes our session 2 of the Engen Play On Coach the Coach Masterclasses. You have been listening and watching Duncan, Crowie and Simphiwe Dludlu talk about motivation and how to prepare a team for a tournament. We've now completed our discussion and there will be a brief session and a brief time for question and answers right after this. So don't forget to send in your questions for Duncan and Simphiwe. As for me, Julia Stewart, it's been a great privilege to be with you today. All of these videos will be available on the Engen website and on YouTube. Thank you so much for watching. We'll see you for the next one.